Welcome to the Profitable Mini Farm. I'm your host, Diego, D-I-E-G-O. Today, Jody and I are focusing on standardization, trying to keep things as similar as possible to simplify your process as much as possible. For example, if all your beds are the same length, they all can use the same drip line, the same row cover, the same shade net, the same insect net. Everything matches up because it's all been standardized. Standardization, the topic for today's episode. But before we get into today's episode, a word from our sponsor, my company, Paper Pot Co., your source for high-quality farm tools. From the Paper Pot Transplanter to the Jang Seeder to the industry-leading Quick Click Seeder, we have a whole bunch of tools to make your job on the farm faster and easier. You can learn more about what we're doing at paperpot.co. With that, let's jump right into it. Standardization with farmer Jody Roebuck of Robuck Farm.
Jody, on the farm right now, you have a lot going on. One of the things you're in the process of doing is installing a new 400 square meter greenhouse. That's about 4,300 square feet here in the U.S. Last episode, we talked a lot about design. This week, we're talking standardization. When you look at placing a new greenhouse on the farm, it's such a permanent structure. How do you think about, where do I put this thing?
Coming back to last week, the first thing I did was run out the electric fence on the ground. And we did that last autumn, one evening. And we remember we're in the southern hemisphere, so we're putting it to our south so it doesn't shade or block our other production. So we mapped it out just with the electric fence on the ground, and we actually went 3 bays wide, and we just realized that's insane. It's way too big. So we've gone down to 2 bays wide, and just by having it placed out, we can see where it is. We can see especially where the access is. Everything got to come in and out of the greenhouse. So we've lined up the main door with our main access to wash and pack. And yeah, we've sited it. The new greenhouse doesn't have as much morning sun as our other greenhouses. It is what it is, but it will get a lot of late afternoon sun. So we just literally marked it out, moved it around, and got it into position where it's going to get the best sun and access. And it's east-west for us, Diego.
And you think about a greenhouse, any even smaller structure like a caterpillar tunnel, they require an upfront investment to put them in. So you want to get as much production space per dollar spent as possible. So you start thinking about pathways, bed widths, that type of thing. And that brings us into what we're talking about today in terms of standardization. When you think about standardization, the universal in market farming is the 30-inch bed top. You studied under John Jevons a lot, and he's really wide beds, 5-foot wide beds, and whatever that is, 1.5 meters or whatever that conversion comes out to.
Yep, you're right.
How have you arrived today at the bed width that you're using after seeing both systems?
Yeah, all of our expansion is on a 30-inch wide bed, and we just see it really fits all of the tools really well. The fork we've developed, all the tools are half the width of the bed. So the fork, our wolf gut and rake, 6-row seeder, the 5-row jang, the greens harvester as well. So as we expand, it's all 30-inch.
Do you think you give some trade-offs of going to a 30-inch bed? Obviously, the industry has gone that way with standardized seating, the JP5, 2 widths on a 30-inch bed. But, if you look at, say, for example, tractor-based farmers here in the States. I was talking to somebody recently. They switched away from 30-inch beds and just went to, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but something like 15-inch spacings on all their rows. And they just had bed blocks, so no beds. It was just every 15 inches, they have another row going in. More space between the crops grow bigger. You think about the wider biointensive style beds. He's planting at close density, so you get those microclimates, but then you lose the trade-off of, hey, tools aren't really made for that. that type of thing. Do you see constraints on a 30-inch bed?
If I make a comparison on our farm, our first 50 beds are John Jevons beds. There's no doubt that in total we have less path space. We only got kind of half the path space. So that garden is very intensive, and we make it work. We use all the same tools on those wide beds. The only tool we're not using on the 1.5 meter wide bed is the paper pot transplanter. We just can't lean out and drag that thing, and these beds are short, so we'd be turning around all the time. It's taken a while for me to adjust. I really like the aesthetics of the 30-inch bed. Everything's super easy. Even with our fork, the bed prep, you're just literally going in a straight line backwards. Our beds are quite small, which suits our context of fast crops because we're flipping the beds at least 4 times a year. I was just on a farm in Tasmania recently, Diego, and they're small scale, bit bigger than 1/8 of an acre, 100% under cat tunnel, cold winter, and they've forfeited their internal paths to create, and the no-till, they've created their beds 1.8 meters wide. It comes back to context. They're called Broom and Brine. Check them out. They're doing beautiful production, but they're pretty much transplanting 90% of their crops. And that used to be us. And this is just our journey. But as we expand and our market streams allow us to sell faster crops, our goal is to be direct seeding the majority of our crops and doing less transplanting. We've got the paper pot, but we're only using it for 2 crops at the moment. And we're just about direct seeding everything else. We just put a wider handlebar on the 5-row jang just to make it easy pushing that up and down our wide beds as well. So I think 30-inch really suits for us small interior paths and hand tools. If I could start again, I would probably be looking at the small Italian market garden tractor, a flail mower, power harrow, and a bucket on the front for turning and moving compost, and configure to that. And the small tractors I've been looking at, it looks like your bed ends up just a bit wider than 30-inch, and then your wheels become your path space, and you still need a little more turnaround for that. So I guess we've got a big restriction on our site, which is space. We're 3/4 to 1 acre of flat area. And I guess with my background, we do things quite intensively. I want to maximize every part of our property as we eventually scale to be growing on all of it.
You have a lot of systems thinking mentality, maximizing space. What pathway size have you arrived at after all these years?
30 centimeters, that's our internal path. I think it's close to 1 foot.
Pretty narrow. How do you find that for harvesting and totes and stuff like that, getting them up and down the aisle?
Yeah, totes. If it's the greens harvester and we're cutting baby leaf, I just put the tote behind me and I drag it down on top of the bed, and I can cut, if I'm standing on the path, I cut half the bed, long ways, and I lean across and I squat and I cut the other half. So I just drag the tote behind me as I cut the salad. We'll come back to crops in a future podcast, but we're just doing 1 cut with our baby leaf salad. So I just drag that down. Carrots, we use a 20-litre bucket, and then we dump them into our totes, and then the totes go onto a standardized trolley, and that gets taken off to wash and pack. We have a main path that is basically all our beds lead to the main path, and main path goes straight to wash and pack. So I guess the other thing is, even when we switch to 30-inch beds, and I'm 5'4" tall, so there's not much of me, I thought with the 30-inch bed, it would make sense to straddle the bed, but I'd really mix up my movement and my stretching, the ergonomics as I work. I briefly straddle the bed and I do squats, and then I do drop knee. So I'm on 1 knee and 1 foot, and I just continually move. So I'm not stuck in the same position. So like carrots, I work backwards down the bed, and I just changing out my body position all the time, which really helps keeping me healthy and, free of aches and pains. So we just make it work. I think the biggest, probably a restriction if we wanted to reconfigure and go to small tractor bases, that we've crammed everything in so tight, we'd have to completely reconfigure and start from scratch. So that ain't going to happen. We're just expanding with our new standardized 30-inch wide, 14-meter long bed, which is somewhere around 45 feet. And that's just how much space we had. It wasn't a unit that I purposely chose. It was just if I made the beds longer, they go down a bank. The ground's not flat anymore.
Beyond just saving pathway space, do you see an actual production advantage to a wider bed? So you go to 1.5 meter width bed, 5 foot wide bed. Is there a production benefit to that in terms of how the crops grow, that type of thing?
I'm not sure how to answer that, Jack. I think we treat all our beds the same. We've got 50 wide beds and something like 70 or 80 skinny beds. We just treat them all the same. All the tools are the same. So on our beds, on our John Jevons beds, the 6-row seeder were 4 pastors. Same with the greens harvester. Same with the 5-row jang. The standardization that's a little different is obviously we need different size covers, red puff hoops and insect nets. That's really where our tarps, our shade nets that we germinate, put on top of the ground as we're germinating seed. That's created 2 standardizations for us. And so what we did, so that we're not hunting over the farm trying to find a shade net to fit the bed, we color coded all of our fabrics and cloths that we use, and we made a shed for them where they're stored, and we just use them. There's a colored tag you can use for putting in the sheep's ear, and it's a little round tag, so we just put tags on all of our fabrics so that when you need to go get one, it's got a place, it's coded, and you just grab it. You're not having to pull everything out and go through everything and run it out and find. And that's part of standardization. That's been a big time saver. And kind of coming back to the standardization has been a huge part of, along with our market stream developing, that's enabled us to double our production and our sales in the same area in the last 2.5 years since COVID began.
Yeah, I think that standardization is a huge point that a lot of newer people miss. You might just think, 30 inches, 50-foot long bed, 100-foot long bed. I just do that because that's what everybody else is doing. But like you said, if all your beds are the same, in theory, everything is then interchangeable. Row hoops, netting, tarps, crop planting is all the same. The number of paper chains per bed is the same. The grams per seed per bed when you're direct seeding is all the same. I think it just makes a huge difference, it's a huge benefit to have one standard width, which is most people 30 inches, and one standard length on the farm, just to save all the hassle of, like you said, having bits of this and bits of that you don't know which bed it goes on.
It definitely streamlines things. I made a comment on our social media a while back, exactly like you were suggesting, Diego, that standardization is key for small-scale biointensive agriculture. And Nicole Masters from Integrity Soils commented, and she said she didn't say it's hilarious, but she said that's funny because that's also the mantra for big ag. And so I think no matter what kind of production you're doing, it's the standardization that simplifies things. And the more we can get out of, the more time we can save, and the more we can empty all of this stuff you're holding it in your brain to free yourself up to focus on the important things, and just putting systems in place, especially for new staff that come into the farm. I think it takes a full season, like 12 months, to understand a farm and to become super efficient, along with understanding the decision making, like why we're treating this crop differently today. And it could be the weather combined with your market streams, understanding what's going on at your 4 different retail stores. You might harvest a crop completely differently and present it differently, ultimately to have zero waste and have a no returns and everything becomes sold.
When you think about the layout of a farm, some people have all beds, so it's just bed after bed after bed after bed. Some people have bed blocks, so they take a set number of beds, that goes in a block, and then all around the farm you have bed blocks that are standardized to the same number of beds with bigger spaces in between bed blocks to get equipment through and that type of thing. How do you view field blocks for crop rotations? Is that a point of consideration in terms of how you designed your blocks?
No, our blocks, if you look at our farm design, like a lot of growers, there's so many growers to look to as influence. And I think the layout, as we expanded, I was really inspired by the design of La Grillinette from Jean-Martin Fortier and Maud Helene from their home farm, where they had field blocks between their greenhouses. I like that the greenhouses are spaced apart and you have field blocks between all the greenhouses. So I kind of was influenced by that. That's how we've set out as we've expanded. Although our model is very different, I'm treating crop rotation bed by bed rather than field block by field block. But remember, we're not doing farmers markets or veggie box. We're supplying a few restaurants and retail, and we're focusing on fast crops. So we're changing our bed 4 times a year. And so I just treat each bed as an individual unit rather than a block, and make those decisions based on what do we need to grow for our market space, what's the crop history here, and really generally a generic crop rotation that we're using, because remember it's all influenced by your sales, but we do our bed prep, we compost and amend, and then we go 2 salads, could be direct seeded baby mustard followed by transplanted lettuce. We treat those as our heavy feeders. Those are the ones, and we're in a subsoil, so those are the ones we really see the benefit or the lift in our production by putting the salad in the composted beds. Then we follow that with the root veg, which we treat as a light feeder. And then we follow that with a financial cover crop, which is pea shoots we do in the field. And the pea shoots put a lot of organic matter into the ground through their roots, and super quick. That's just a real generic crop rotation. And the greenhouses will do the same, but we'll switch the 2 salads out for like a cherry tomato. But in saying that, I'll also treat a bed based on our sales and just what we have to be planting. So we're late winter, it's very wet and overcast. And at the moment, we've got our overwintered carrots. We go into winter with about 1/3 of the farm in carrots, and we're planting a ton of area in fast direct seeded salads. We just need more area to keep up with our sales at the moment. And then as the day length increases, to do the same volumes of direct seeded salad, we just don't need the area. So as spring comes, we diversify with our crops.
On a crop like yours with limited space, why even have field blocks of 9 beds? Why not just go wall to wall with beds? You know, have your pathways still at your 30 centimeters, but why not just have beds as far as you can stretch them instead of having field blocks?
I guess we were looking, we've got 4 greenhouses at the moment, and the 5th, the new one, will be our biggest by far. But yeah, I wanted to space the greenhouses out, I guess, so we're not shading on our southern side, which would be your northern, as much as possible, and keeping the access. So actually quite a few of our beds run east-west between the greenhouses. It doesn't work for the sun so much, but it works for letting excess water out, and also for bringing our harvest come straight to the main path, straight to wash and pack. And if you look at our farm design, it really allowed us to maximize the space between the greenhouses. So we, apart from our main path to the wash and pack, We hardly even have any paths. And, if I started again, Diego, we just didn't have the time or money in the beginning or the experience at the scale we're at now. But I would be going one big greenhouse up on day one, a high wind design. But we just didn't, we bootstrapped the farm from nothing, and we've heavily reinvested in the last 6 years. I'm pretty open about our journey, but 2009, I sold my skateboard to pay the Powerball that week. We weren't putting up a $50,000 greenhouse because it was just not even possible.
There you have it, Jody Roebuck of Robuck Farm on standardization. If you want to learn more about Jody and everything that he's doing, you can check him out at Robuck Farm, which I've linked to below. If you enjoyed this episode, can you do me a favor? Leave a review on iTunes. It helps the algorithm. It takes you just a minute to scroll over to there with your phone, put a star review in, type something in, and it doesn't take you a lot of time, but it matters a lot on our end for the podcast. So if you can, please leave a review on iTunes. That's all for this one. Thanks for listening. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.